Hi, everyone. Welcome to Project Destination Clark. My name is Nick Porcella. I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Admissions at Clark University. I'll be your host today. This session is one that we're calling FYIs and first-year academics. And as you might guess, we're going to focus on the first-year academic experience. We have three panelists today who are going to be helping to answer questions on everything from picking a first-year intensive and talking about what that is, to the first-year academic advising process. Before I have them introduce themselves, though, I do want to offer a couple tips for using Zoom. And if you've used our webinars before, these will sound familiar. First things first, you'll notice at the top or bottom of your screen that you have both a chat feature as well as a Q&A feature. You're going to use the chat feature if you have technological issues. We do have somebody behind the scenes who can help with those issues. So please type in chat if you have a technical issue. If you'd like to ask our panelists a question today, please use the Q&A feature. And I have a reminder on each slide about that, so please use the Q&A feature for questions. We're not going to be using the hand raise feature, so you can ignore that. We will not be using hand raise. Please note, if you do submit a question, you will not see it right away. In order to ensure that we can get to as many of these questions as possible, we do have an admissions staff member who's behind the scenes queuing up your questions one at a time. So say hello to Natasha, everyone. Thanks, Natasha, for being here. We'll answer some of the questions live on air and some via text. Bottom line, we appreciate your patience as we work to share our experience with all of you. And because we're going to have a lot of attendees, I will apologize in advance. We will not make it to every question. But we will answer every question in some form. If you don't get it answered today, we will follow up very soon by email this week with the answer to your question. All right, so with that, let's get started. Today I am joined by three panelists, Professor Amy Richter of the History Department, as well as two current first-year students, Zach Conant and Apple Gould-Schultz. So we're actually gonna have you all go to, oh, we're already on that slide. Perfect. So I'm gonna actually have all three of my panelists say hello and give a brief introduction. And we'll start with Amy, Dr. Richter.
Hi, I'm Amy Richter. I am a professor in the History Department. I specialize in 19th century US women's history. I have taught a first-year seminar every other year for the last 20 years. I have two seminars that I offer. One is on 19th century American history through women's eyes, and the other is a history of home in 19th century America, which I just taught this past fall. So I've got a cohort of first-year students right now that I've been hanging out with.
Thanks, Professor Richter. And Zach, you're up.
Hi guys, I'm Zach. I'm a first year in Massachusetts, major in econ, and I'm minor in management and data science. Outside the classroom, I'm the co-founder and vice president of Clark University Distributive Education Clubs of America, which is a business program here at Clark. And on the field, I'm a member of the men's varsity lacrosse team.
Thanks, Zach. And Apple.
Hi, everyone. As Nick said, I'm a first-year Clark. I'm from the city of and all that part of the year.
Apple, we're going to pause on you for a second. We actually can't hear you very well, so we're just going to we'll see if we can get that fixed. So we're going to move forward for now. But I know Apple's class of 2023 and an environmental science major. So Apple, if you just want to check from your end, and we'll come back to you very shortly. We are going to talk a little bit about our theme today, FYIs and first-year intensives. You're welcome to submit questions throughout. We're going to tackle most of our questions at the end, but you can submit them at any time. So Natasha, next slide, please. So the first question I actually have is for Professor Richter, and then we'll have our students answer as well, is very simply, what is a first-year intensive, and what does that look like for a professor who's teaching it?
So a first-year intensive is intended to be a course that will help incoming students make the transition from high school to college by bundling teaching, so coursework, and then your academic advisor. So this past fall, I had a group of 18 students who were students in my class. I saw them twice a week. And then they were also my advisees. So I meet with them about course selection and registration and troubleshooting and cranky roommates and anything else that might bubble up as they're figuring out how to live their lives as first-year college students. And again, the idea is that there's ongoing FaceTime, throughout the week. And so sometimes in class, we can troubleshoot issues that are not class related. And sometimes class time can spill over into the advising space. And there are a couple of different versions of first year course experiences. So mine is a seminar experience, a small class, but there are also versions where first year students are bundled together within a larger lecture course, which happens in the sciences. So there are a couple of different versions of it, but the intention is always the same, to make sure that you have a faculty member who is with you in the classroom and thinking about your life beyond the classroom.
Thanks, Professor Richter. And Apple, I think you're back with us now. If you just want to give us your brief intro again, we'll test the audio. And then if you can also tackle the question of what was your first year intensive and what did that look like for you?
Sure. I'm so sorry, my Wi-Fi went out, but I'm Apple. I'm a first year at Clark, majoring in environmental science, and I'm considering a minor in biology. I'm a coxswain on the women's varsity rowing team, and I'm part of the Latin America Student Organization. So my first year intensive was in the sciences. As Dr. Richter said, I was bundled as a first year in one of the lab courses out of a lecture of 200 students for Biology 101. And I chose it because I didn't want to be in a lab with juniors and seniors who were maybe taking it for the science credit. And my FYI, I think, was very different from some of the other ones because it was a research opportunity, really. I was studying different bacteria and antibiotic properties, and it was worth it. It was amazing.
Thank you. And Zach, same question. What was your FYI and what was the experience like for you?
So my FYI was Management 100, which is the Art and Science of Management. The class itself was kind of just an introduction to basic management tasks you'll need and kind of how to work within the groups, make a group into a team, which I thought was really nice. And for me, the first year intensive really helped me kind of come within Clark and learn more about the opportunities. With only 25 students in the class, it was a lot smaller than a lot of the other FYI classes. But it was nice for me to be able to kind of get to know everyone, learn in a small classroom while still being able to kind of understand the workload for my future here at Clark.
Thank you. And then a question for either Zach or Apple that I missed. How did you choose your FYI?
I can take this one. My FYI over the summer, obviously you don't, for your FYI, it does not have to be what you intend to be your major. So for me, it was my minor. Over the summer, I was looking at doing an FYI, in econ, and unfortunately that class was already completely full. So I took the opportunity to talk with my summer advisor who helped me pick classes, and she said that this is a really good class where you work with a nonprofit organization, which I'll talk about a little more later, but I felt that it was kind of a class that my summer advisor showed me was going to help me be well-rounded and learn how to become involved in the Clark community. Thank you.
And we can go to the next slide here. And within that, I think somebody mentioned advising too. You do have a summer advisor, but important to note is the professor who teaches your first year intensive does become your first academic advisor. So question for Professor Richter, what is it like being an advisor in the FYI, and how does advising work?
How does advising work? That's a great question. The first year advising is fun advising from a faculty standpoint, but also sometimes a little challenging because, as Zach mentioned, sometimes you select your first year intensive course because it's something that you intend to major in. Sometimes you don't get your first choice and you use your first year intensive to stretch. I've had students take my history seminar because they love history, and I've had students come and take my seminar because they don't like history and they want to be in a small, intimate space to have the best version of an experience that they're a little nervous about. So that means first year advising. I talk to students who want to be psychology majors. So as a history professor, I now know all of the psychology major requirements that you need to take in your first 2 years. I know what it means to major in political science. The other thing is I'm pretty honest when I don't know something. And so part of being a good first year advisor and being well advised is having somebody who's gonna move you around the institution. So I send my advisees where they need to go. I send faculty colleagues. So it's a pretty flexible advising structure. I talk to students about financial aid if they're figuring out things like that. And again, when I don't know something, I'm very, very honest about that. But it's also sometimes kind of heartbreaking. I'm struck that Zach and Apple seem to have already declared majors. I always tell my first year advisees that if I do my job really well, half of them or more are going to break up with me in sophomore year when they go on to their major advisors. So it's an exciting moment. I have a cohort of new first year advisees this year, and I have a cohort who are graduating. And I feel like once you're my advisee, you're mine forever, even though I've sent you on to your, major advisor.
Thank you. And we'll start with Apple in this next set of questions here is, what other courses do you take in your first year? And how does that parallel Clark's curriculum overall?
Sure. So one of the, can everyone hear me? One of the core components of Clark's curriculum is the program of liberal studies, where you're taking different courses to supplement broader categories of learning. So in my first year, I took courses that I knew were prerequisites for environmental science, like Biology 101 and Environmental Science and Policy. But I also took a history class and an English class that I used both to connect what I'd been learning in high school and kind of those subjects with what I needed to fulfill Clark's curriculum. And it wasn't just that, it was classes that I was genuinely interested in and that I thought I should totally take this my first year because it would be such a cool introduction to this part of Clark or some other part. Zach, do you have anything to add?
I think it was fine for me because I knew since before high school I was interested in something in business, economics, finance, something down that road. So I knew I wanted to take coming in, but obviously you can't take 4 econ classes in one semester. That'd be crazy. So I was looking around, and as I was picking my classes, and I happened to see one. It was urban geography. It was an urban geography class. It talks about how kind of the cities are built. And I thought it was interesting because even though it wasn't an economics class or business class, it connected back to business in that way where how the city is set up for a way that helps it grow economically. And I thought that was interesting to me. So I was like, yeah, I'll take that class. And personally, I'm not the greatest writer, and I ended up taking that class, which was a lot of writing. And my English class was a lot of writing. So I think it shows that even though Clark's curriculum is very well-rounded, it also can just connect back to anything. You can make it how you want it to be. You can connect back to your major, minor, or your interest. So.
Thank you. And Apple and Zach, I know you both have a brief story to tell, so actually we can go to the next slide. I'd love to hear from Apple first. I know you have 2 slides here on a look into your first year experience. So what can you tell us in a minute or so?
In a minute, super fast minute. So part of the reason that I took those English and history courses that I did, I took early American writers and European history in the 19th century, was because I thought they would be things that I was already slightly familiar with, and I was completely floored. They were not. And I think that was an excellent introduction into college, was that everything that I thought was going to be like the same was completely different. But I still had a lot of fun learning, and I wanted to be there learning, which was an amazing experience. And then in comparison to the second semester, it didn't feel different. I was just taking classes that were slightly harder. I'm pushing myself in a completely different English class, even though like that's not what I'm studying. I just love the English department at Clark. And then what really got me going was Biology 101 in the FYI. So you can go to the next slide. It was a research opportunity essentially, and I went in knowing that I didn't want to be taking a lab course with people who weren't freshmen, because I wanted to create a small group of other students who were kind of struggling with biology, who hadn't taken it since freshman year of high school. And it was a beautiful hands-on way for me to learn about genetics and get a research opportunity in my first semester. And I think Clark says this a lot, but it's a research institution and a liberal arts institution. And that doesn't necessarily mean just in sciences, but it means that there's so many things and so many opportunities that you have available to you that like they just start first year.
Thank you. And Zach, I know we don't have a slide for you here, but actually I'd love to hear, you said you had a story as well to share. So what can you tell us?
Yeah, so I think kind of my management 100 class is kind of an awakening to me about how important collaborative work is and how the culture of Clark really supports collaborative work. So the main purpose of this class was you're thrown into a group, and as I mentioned earlier, groups need to be teams. So that was kind of the point of it. Is we didn't get to pick it out of our friends. It was nothing like that. She gave us the group, and we had to make a team out of that. And we worked with a nonprofit organization within Worcester, which ours was Friendly House. They have activities for students after school to kind of have an opportunity to have a safe place to go to, which is really nice. And we were doing a fundraiser to raise money for maybe different cooking supplies or athletic balls or whatever they need to kind of go on with their programs. I think this really, one thing this really taught me is how to use Clark's resources. And it wasn't like we were just thrown into it. Our advisor was really helpful with teaching us how to use these Clark resources. I think one of the most important ones that comes out and helps with the student life is the What's Happening email. It's an email we get every week saying like what's going on in that week, and we got our fundraiser. We got our fundraiser onto that What's Happening email. So I think that's really cool how they taught you to use something that you can use the rest of your 4 years. Yeah, I think that's kind of the main point of my Management 100 class. So that was cool.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And Natasha will take the next slide. And at this point, we're actually going to open up to questions. I've got about 25 questions here. I'm going to try and do this as a speed round to get through as many as we can. Only a couple of them I'm going to answer because they are somewhat quick. We've got one, which is, where can you find a list of the FYIs to choose from? And Amy can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure this list is quite available yet, but the registrar will be publishing that in the next, I believe, few weeks to early in the summer. But if you want, you can actually go to the registrar's website, so clarku.edu/registrar. If you look back to this past fall, you can actually look at the FYIs from this past fall. Not all of them are going to be the same, but it might give you an idea of the flavor of those. Apple, a question for you. Someone is planning on majoring in environmental science. How's the program, and how do you figure out which path in the field you want to pursue, such as physical, law, or conservation?
Sure. So I went in knowing that I wanted environmental science or geography from whatever school that I was going to, and Clark has two really amazing programs in both fields, and so I decided I would combine them. So my major in environmental science has a specific track of Earth system science, which is concentrated in the geography department. So you either have a geography concentration, a policy concentration, or a conservation concentration. And it's really up to you. I chose mine partially because I knew it combined with geography, and I never wanted to take chemistry. So like that made my decision pretty easy. And while I loved the policy class that I took, it wasn't something that I wanted to study for the next 4 years. So it really depends on testing out what classes you prefer and kind of where you feel you fit in the department.
Perfect. And a follow-up question to that is, can you major in both the bio and the physical science parts, or can you only choose one of them?
It's my understanding that you can only do one track, but you can supplement it with a double major or a minor. Like I'm supplementing mine with a biology minor because it fits into the botanical and not environmental, but ecological side that I want to look at.
Perfect. Amy, this question's for you. Is very simply, what's the difference in a nutshell between the FYI and a regular course, and what does the class size comparison look like?
The class size comparison is going to vary by program and by department. So a typical seminar in the history department is between 14 and 16. A typical first year intensive in the history department is between 16 and 18. A lecture discussion class in history is 35 to 50. But if you compare that with psychology, if you were going to take a first year intensive in psychology, you would have, again, that 16 to 18 student number, but intro to psychology is 100 students, right? So it varies. In terms of the kind of the way that the course is pitched, it is a course that is self-consciously aware that the students are transitioning to college learning and college expectations. I ask my students to do very similar things in a first year intensive, but I might spend more time unpacking instructions or thinking through models, or, but the courses are intended to be simultaneously supportive and ambitious. And I like to think that courses at all levels are pitched that way, but these have a special awareness of where the students are at this particular moment in their educations.
Thanks. Zach, a two-part question for you, and it's about picking an FYI in terms of something you want to major in or something you just want to learn more about. And so the question is it okay to pick an FYI just for a passion, or is it better to take one that you should major in?
I think if you have a passion for something, I think it's a great idea to go follow it, because you never know, that could lead you on to changing your major. I know my friends, after their first year intensive, they didn't get the one they wanted in the first case, I guess. So they took a different class, and now some of them are considering majoring in it. So I think it's important for you not only to try to choose the class you think you're going to be interested in, but expand your options. It doesn't just have to be your first year intensive. That can be any first year class you take, because you don't have to declare a major till, I believe, it's end of sophomore year. So you have time to think about kind of what you want to do and what path you want to go down.
And Apple, here's a follow-up question for you that is similar in nature, but I'd love your take too. How would you suggest an undecided student choose their FYI?
Think about the things that you like doing. At some point, the registrar will publish in the class lists all the FYIs, and they'll be specifically marked as FYIs. And I recommend you take like 45 minutes to an hour to just read through them. And honestly, whatever sounds cool to you is definitely just the way to go.
Perfect. And this question here that I can answer is similar to one we've already talked about a little bit, but when do you get to start choosing classes and seeing a list of classes? Just like the FYIs, I believe the course listing may already be out. Panelists, is that true? Yeah. So if you go to the registrar's page, again, clarku.edu/registrar, you can actually see the classes that are being offered next fall, with the exception of the FYIs. Those are still being formulated. But you can start looking at the classes to see what you could be taking. Amy, here's a question for you. So Professor Richter, do you recommend choosing an FYI based on what the class is, what the class is about, or based on the professor teaching it?
That seems like a question the student should ask, but I think it seems, I've had students use their first year intensives a lot of different ways. As Zach mentioned, I think sometimes it's great to get to know a department or a discipline. I think it's probably hard as an incoming student to pick a course based on a specific professor. And I don't know also, again, to think strategically about where are places that you might want to know faculty? You know, so sometimes I've had students take my first year intensive in history, even though they didn't necessarily love my version of history, but they wanted to have a base in the department. But I've also had students come and I've been the only history class they've taken because they like the topic. And sometimes those students stay on and they become advisees longer term. As Zach said, sometimes you get surprised. And so I've had students who don't love history, but they love women and gender studies and they stay with me. I think, again, I don't know if I would choose just based on the professor. I think it has to be a choice that comes, as Zach said, from where you are and what you care about. And as Apple said, you have to think about what kind of learning you want to be doing. And that should be clear from the descriptions, but you should certainly Google all the faculties, Google cows come home, and see what you can find out about us. I mean, you should be as informed as you'd like to be.
Perfect. And we have just a couple minutes left. And remember, for everybody asking questions, that if we don't get to your question today, we will be following up with you by email. So every question will be answered. It just might not be in the next 4 minutes because we have about 35 more questions that just came in. But I'll ask just a couple more here. Apple, this is a question about your class sizes. You mentioned that the Bio 101 class had about 200 students. Is it typical for a first-year class to be of that size?
Biology 101, 102, and Psychology 101, those are going to be the largest classes offered at Clark. That's between about 100 and 200 students. Every other class that I've taken has 30 students or less. Most of the introductory courses that I've taken that are outside Bio 101, between 20 and 30 students. Those are just our largest lecture halls offered on campus because they're for our most popular majors.
Perfect. And I guess this is sort of a last question for now before I have some closing thoughts. This one I'll give to Zach. Is how does the small size of Clark feel when you're actually on campus? What's your take on that?
Small, as Clark as in amount of students, or Clark as in, so I'll say Clark as in the size of it to start. I think it's nice, especially in Worcester, you know, it gets windy and cold. It's nice where you can kind of get to the CAF in a 2-minute walk. And as you know, I got friends at other universities who are riding buses, so it's nice to get to stay close. But the small nature student wise, I think it's nice because you get to know everyone's face. You're friendly with everyone whenever you go on campus, or if you ever show up to a club or a class, you're gonna know at least one kid. I mean, I've never been to a class where I haven't known at least 4 or 5 of the kids to right off the bat. So it is nice, and you'll see them. And once you see a person, you'll see them around campus all the time, and everyone's friendly. So it's nice to have that small feel where you know everyone, you feel like everyone's your friend. So.
Thank you. And thank you actually to all of our panelists today, Professor Richter, Zach, and Apple, for answering the questions. As I said, we do have plenty more, and we unfortunately don't have time to answer them all now. We'll follow up very soon. Everyone's going to get an answer to your questions. But I hope you enjoyed learning more about FYIs and the first-year academic experience at Clark. I'll talk a little bit about this reminder slide, which is our last slide for today, in that we do have more of these Project Destination Clark events coming up. And these are all designed on what you, our audience, thank you, what you all sent in that you wanted to learn more about. So really honored to spend some time with you all today. Thanks for taking some time this afternoon. You're welcome to check out clarku.edu/admitted/webinars for the full list of what we're doing. The next webinar is just in a couple days. This Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern time, we'll be talking about student clubs and organizations. This webinar will be available as a recording for anyone within the next few days. So take a look back if you want to view it again, and we'll follow up shortly to those questions we missed. So thank you all for tuning in. Until next time, everyone, have fun, stay healthy, and remember, we've got this.